Bonsoir tout le monde. Before we get started, I want to give you an update on the situation in BC. As you know, the folks in British Columbia are going through extremely difficult times right now, and the federal government is working with the provincial government and everyone on the ground to help them as best we can. I asked Minister Blair to convene an incident response group meeting yesterday. He convened another one again today. And the ministers gave an update a little earlier today to Canadians this afternoon. First of all, we approved BC's request for help yesterday. The support is moving right now, and we will do more to help people directly. The Canadian Armed Forces on the ground have been helping out. They've already rescued over 300 people. Helicopters out of Kamloops and Esquimalt have been deployed. Last night, there were reconnaissance teams assessing the situation. By the end of today, we had 120 soldiers on the ground in Abbotsford with 350 personnel staged in Edmonton ready to deploy as needed. We will continue to work with Indigenous communities to keep people safe. We'll work with the province, with industry and all other partners on logistics, on repairs, on getting goods moving. Nous savons à quel point c'est une situation difficile pour les gens en Colombie-Britannique, mais je peux vous assurer que le gouvernement fédéral reste sur l'enjeu. On est là pour donner toute l'aide nécessaire aussi longtemps que ça durera. On est en train de se mobiliser aux côtés de la province. This trip to DC has been extremely effective. During the bilateral meetings I had with the American administration and the North American Leaders Summit, we've really seen that our partnerships are strong and unwavering. On est toujours prêt à continuer à travailler ensemble sur des enjeux importants pour nos citoyens. D'abord, sur la COVID, our first priority remains putting this pandemic behind us, ensuring we continue to roll out vaccines, including getting as many of our populations vaccinated as possible, moving forward on vaccines for children, moving forward on booster shots for those who need it. We're going to be continuing to coordinate and work together with our North American partners to ensure that we are not only ending this pandemic here in North America, but also doing our part to end it all around the world. Nous avons des liens étroits entre nos trois pays qui nous permettent de faire face à de grands défis ensemble. Pour rebâtir en mieux, il faut apprendre des leçons de cette pandémie et se concentrer sur les gens vulnérables et comment on va relancer nos économies pour une forte croissance économique. Obviously, the CUSMA free trade deal, the new NAFTA that we signed just a couple of years ago, is a strong pillar of support for trade in our economies and continues to create opportunities for our citizens. We talked about the need for resilient, sustainable supply chains, particularly coming out of this pandemic, and support for small businesses as well. I did have an opportunity to directly raise concerns about the proposed electric vehicle tax credit, as well as discussing the Buy America initiatives and concerns around the Line 5 situation. But we have to remember that people are at the heart of our economy. To remain competitive, workers and businesses need the right conditions to thrive. We have to be there to invest in them, to give them the opportunities to grow. Part of that is recognizing that we have to face climate change. We have to be strong leaders on the environment, and we have an opportunity to become global leaders in clean solutions. We also can move forward on strong labor protections and standards, and we'll always be there to reinforce and strengthen our democracies as we encourage and stand strong for democracies abroad as well. Le monde est plein de défis et de changements ces jours-ci, en sortant de la pandémie, en regardant tout ce qui se passe un peu partout. Et nous avons une force et une résilience entre leaders nord-américains, 3 leaders progressistes au Mexique, aux États-Unis et au Canada, qui sont axés sur le bien-être des gens, tous les investissements qu'on doit faire ensemble et tout l'apprentissage qu'on fait en sortant de cette pandémie pour bâtir un monde meilleur pour tous. We're going to keep doing the work. We're going to keep delivering for our citizens and building a better future. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va maintenant prendre 25 minutes de questions pour take 25 minutes of questions.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Mélanie Marquis de la presse. Vous le disiez, vous avez soulevé l'enjeu du crédit d'impôt pour les véhicules zéro émission. Qu'est-ce que vous avez dit à M. Biden et que vous a-t-il répondu en retour?
Ça fait plusieurs mois maintenant qu'on souligne l'enjeu qui nous préoccupe par rapport au crédit pour les véhicules électriques qui seraient seulement faits aux États-Unis. On a souligné à quel point ce serait un grand problème pour la production d'auto au Canada. On a très clairement souligné notre position. Les Américains, au fil des conversations qu'on a eues, pas seulement depuis des mois, mais particulièrement ces 2 derniers jours, nous ont entendus très, très clairement et on va continuer de travailler sur cet enjeu. We've been highlighting our concern around the proposed electric vehicle credit for electric vehicles uniquely made in the United States and the impact it would have on Canadian jobs, on the Canadian auto industry at a time where we are investing significantly in the kinds of zero-emission vehicles that the world is going to need in the coming years. I highlighted over the course of these past 2 days in many, many different conversations Canada's real concerns about the impact it would have not just on the industry in Canada, but on the integrated industry and workers on both sides of the border. And we're going to continue to do the work necessary to not just highlight our position, but find solutions.
M. Trudeau, les Américains ont pas l'air d'être sur la même longueur d'onde. La porte-parole de la Maison-Blanche, Jen Psaki, disait que c'était pas comme ça qu'il voyait quand on lui a demandé si ça contrevenait au nouvel ALENA. Donc, et qu'est-ce que les Américains vous ont répondu? Puis qu'est-ce que le Canada peut faire? Qu'est-ce qu'on a dans notre boîte à outils pour essayer de les persuader de changer de cap?
Tout d'abord, comme on a vu à bien des moments au cours des dernières années, c'est de créer des barrières additionnelles entre le commerce et le travail que nous faisons ensemble dans l'industrie automobile ou autre. C'est pas juste difficile pour les Canadiens, pour les travailleurs canadiens, ça finit par être difficile pour les travailleurs américains et pour l'intégration de notre économie nord-américaine. Alors, nous allons continuer de souligner nos préoccupations là-dedans. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec les Américains pendant que eux entament les différents processus législatifs qui entourent cette proposition-là. Et on va continuer d'être là, comme les gens savent qu'on fera toujours, pour défendre les intérêts des Canadiens.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Steve Scheer, Reuters. NAFTA originally came about in part to integrate the North American economies to compete with the European Union. Today, we heard the Mexican president talk about greater integration of North America to compete with China. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on what he said and whether you agree with that point of view.
I think regardless of what counter forces are out there, it is obvious that working together to be more competitive in North America is extremely important, particularly at a time when we're seeing some of the challenges faced by supply chains that stretch out across the globe. There is a desire coming out of this pandemic to look at more resilience, more trusted partners, more ability to be self-sufficient, and that can happen not just within one given country, but within one region. And that impetus for us to continue to work together and look at how we can even deepen our supply chain cooperations, from everything from critical minerals in Canada to manufacturing to greater partnerships on services as well. These are the kinds of things that create resilience within North America that are very interesting for us all.
You said you got to discuss some of the irritants, let's say, for Canada, Line 5, Buy American, and EV tax credits. Would you say you're disappointed that you don't have solutions?
I think we all understand that in a relationship as big and as deep and as all-encompassing for so many of us as the relationship between Canada and the United States, there are always going to be challenges coming up, and as we solve some, new ones will arise. And what is most important is that we have strong, direct lines of communication and that we engage with them in constructive ways. And that's exactly what we've done. As we've consistently stood up for Canadian jobs, for Canadian workers, for Canadian industries, it significantly helps that the current integration and the overlaps within our supply chains and the fact that we work so well together already means that it's difficult to find things that are bad for Canada that aren't also in some ways difficult or bad for the United States. And those are the conversations we continue to have.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, Richard Torres de TVA, dans le communiqué conjoint des trois leaders, il y a une référence au fait qu'on est confronté à une crise de santé publique liée à la multiplication de la violence armée. Et il y a une référence au fait qu'on veut s'attaquer à la multiplication des armes avec une comprehensive coordinated approach. Qu'est-ce que concrètement ça veut vouloir dire pour les Canadiens et pour les Montréalais qui vivent cette crise-là très concrètement?
Ça fait plusieurs années qu'on travaille, qu'on s'assure que nos forces policières travaillent ensemble sur le crime transfrontalier, mais aussi sur les préoccupations que nous avons tous avec les armes à feu. Évidemment, avec cette tragédie la plus récente qu'on a vécue dans mon comté à Montréal, avec le jeune Thomas Trudel qui est décédé, nous réfléchissons tous à comment nous allons devoir en faire encore plus. C'est pour ça que nous allons continuer de travailler avec le gouvernement du Québec et les municipalités qui veulent bannir les armes à poing pour justement faire ça, en se souvenant aussi que le gouvernement fédéral peut être là pour appuyer la province dans ses services policiers et le travail qu'ils sont en train de faire. Mais pour plus d'informations sur la coordination avec les États-Unis sur la sécurité publique, je vais me tourner vers notre ministre de la Sécurité publique, Marco Mendicino. Marco?
Merci, Premier ministre. Tout d'abord, je veux exprimer mes condoléances à la famille Trudel. C'est une tragédie, c'est inacceptable. Aujourd'hui, excellent. Aujourd'hui, j'avais parlé avec mon homologue américaine, le secrétaire Mayorkas, de ce problème-là, et nous avons établi un dévouement de continuer de collaboration pour faire les investissements dans les deux côtés de la frontière pour arrêter le problème de le trafic de les armes à feu. C'est un problème, c'est un défi, mais on va continuer avec un esprit de collaboration. Merci.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, je vous ai vu à 2 reprises dans le bureau ovale avec le président Trump. Expliquez-nous en quoi cette fois-ci discuter, de négocier avec le président Biden, c'est-à-dire par rapport à ce que vous avez dit.
Tout d'abord, je pense que c'est assez évident que nous sommes alignés sur les valeurs de façon profonde, moi et le président Biden, que ce soit par rapport à la lutte contre les changements climatiques, que ce soit d'être engagé de façon positive dans le monde pour défendre la démocratie et les démocraties, que ce soit au niveau de la croissance pour la classe moyenne, d'être là pour les femmes, les minorités. Nous avons énormément d'atomes crochus et c'est toujours agréable de pouvoir d'emblée être alignés dans nos approches. Évidemment, il va toujours avoir des points de différents entre nos deux pays, mais on a la capacité justement de bien travailler ensemble pour les résoudre.
David Aiken, Global News. Good evening, Prime Minister. You may have heard that China has apparently kidnapped one of its top tennis stars, a woman who had just accused a top member of the Chinese government of sexual assault. No one can find her. And that reminded many Canadians that China kidnapped our citizens and still holds some. And then many Canadians might say, why would we fund any athlete to go to the Olympics? Why should we send any Canadian athletes to the Olympics to reward China for their awful behavior?
I think, first of all, the issue of the 2 Canadians who were illegally and arbitrarily detained by China came up a number of times in my conversations over the past couple of days, and I thanked a number of members of Congress and, of course, the administration for being steadfast friends and helping to resolve this situation where Canada was simply standing up for a treaty that we'd signed with one of our oldest partners. We're pleased that was resolved. But of course, over the past many months, we have been having conversations with partners and allies around the world about the Beijing Olympics, about what our approach should be. I can highlight however, that there are an awful lot of athletes in Canada and around the world who have been training and focused on this very, very much, and we're looking for a way to both be able to see them show their capacities and fulfill all the hard work that they've done for many years, while continuing to demonstrate our real concerns with the way the Chinese government has behaved.
Many athletes, of course, can win world championships, etc., and do it another four than the Olympic. Nonetheless, you were sitting beside Mr. Biden today when he was asked about this question, and he said he would consider maybe a diplomatic boycott. So I wonder if there might be other measures where the Canadian government might say, right, our diplomats are not going to participate in the Beijing Olympics. Did you have a discussion with Mr. Biden about that, and might we expect a boycott of our diplomats?
Like I said, we've been engaged with like-minded partners around the world over the past many months on this issue. We continue to have those discussions, and as the games approach, I'm sure there will be more information as to the exact posture Canada and indeed the world will take towards this issue.
Prime Minister Tom Barry, CBC. On the electric vehicles, you're talking about wanting to find solutions to this issue in the United States. Can you talk about some of the solutions you're putting forward? What do you want to see the Americans do to finish this?
Well, first of all, as a reminder, there is very much still a legislative process underway that has a number more steps. There are reconciliation and implementation issues as well. These are conversations that we have been busy having. I can certainly tell you the Americans are very aware of Canada's position on this and our concerns around it, and quite frankly, the threats it poses to over 50 years of integrated automaking in our two countries that was most recently reaffirmed through the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, the new NAFTA.
What are you looking for, though? Are you looking for Canada to be included in this tax credit? I mean, what specifically do you want?
I think there are a number of ways to look at solving this, but the essence is to recognize that Canada has been making significant investments in zero-emission vehicles, that we have a commitment to make sure that 50% of all 50% of all new vehicles sold in Canada by 2030 are zero-emission, and indeed 100% of new vehicles in Canada will be zero-emission by 2035. We are committed to doing it. We have critical minerals like cobalt and lithium and nickel and others that are essential in the production of zero-emission vehicles. We can and must continue to be a strong player in the integrated North American auto production and market, and that is the point that we made very clearly to a number of American interlocutors over the past couple of days.
Adrian Morrow with the Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, Joe Biden shut you down today when you basically said that he didn't want to talk about the EV thing until after it gets through Congress, at a point when the legislation is already going to be, sort of set. I mean, how disappointed are you, or how disappointed should Canadians be that, you came down here with a pretty straightforward request, stop trying to violate this trade deal we signed with you, and the President basically said, don't want to talk about it.
Actually, Adrian, he was talking to you when he said that. When the journalist asked him if he was going to talk about that to them, he said, no, we're going to talk about it in this conversation. And I had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to chat with him exactly about this and express my very real concerns about this. So we will continue to make representations to the Americans on how integrated our vehicle market and vehicle production facilities are in between Canada and the United States, and have been for over 50 years, and we will continue to.
So what did Joe Biden tell you then? If he said, okay, we are going to negotiate, we're not going to wait until the end of the legislative process, what was it that he told you then?
We talked about how we need to find solutions moving forward, but those conversations will continue to be ongoing.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister. Catherine Watson with CBS News. Forgive me if any of this was covered in French. I know we were kind of going over this question again and again, but I want to ask if President Biden expressed any willingness to budge at all on either the EV tax credits issue or on the Line 5 pipeline?
Well, we know that the bill going currently before Congress is extremely important to this administration. We recognize that there's a lot in there that is extremely important and of value to the American people. We highlighted a concern that we have specifically about the electric vehicle tax credit that doesn't, I think, recognize fully the level to which auto production has been incredibly integrated in our two countries over the past more than 50 years. It's possible for a given auto part to crisscross our border 6 or 7 times before it finally rolls off the assembly line in a completed vehicle. And we know we're going to be able to work together on building electric vehicles that, quite frankly, not just our citizens but the world needs. So we highlighted that we should be able to find a path forward to continue to build vehicles together because it's good for competitiveness, it's good for jobs on both sides of the border, and it's good for fighting climate change for the future.
Sure. And then will Canada file a dispute under the USMCA, or I should say CUSMA, if the proposed electric vehicle tax incentive issue isn't resolved?
As you know, there are still many steps to go through in terms of this legislation, so we will see how they unfold step by step.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Azawad-Legorgis, Radio-Canada. Est-ce que vous êtes déçu par le protectionnisme du président Joe Biden par rapport à celui de Donald Trump, qui n'est finalement pas si différent? Votre sentiment là-dessus?
Au contraire, nous savons que nous allons toujours devoir travailler main dans la main avec d'autres pays pour créer des opportunités pour nos travailleurs. Je comprends qu'on est dans une ère présentement aux États-Unis où il y a un sentiment de protectionnisme qui court depuis plusieurs années, mais comme on a toujours pu souligner depuis des décennies, l'intégration actuelle de nos deux économies, de nos chaînes d'approvisionnement, veut dire que dès qu'il y a application de protectionnisme contre le Canada, ça fait mal à des travailleurs et des manufacturiers aux États-Unis, en plus qu'au Canada. Et on va continuer de démontrer que cette réalité d'intégration de nos économies veut dire que nous allons toujours mieux faire quand nous travaillons ensemble.
Une dernière question, traduire un peu tout ce que vous avez dit en anglais. Sur les véhicules électriques, est-ce que vous avez obtenu une garantie ou une promesse ou un engagement de la part du président?
Dans bien des conversations qu'on a eues hier et aujourd'hui avec différents membres de l'administration, du Congrès, on a souligné très clairement nos préoccupations que, évidemment, cette approche qu'il propose ne sera pas juste mauvais pour le Canada, mais serait aussi mauvais pour les États-Unis, étant donné l'intégration actuelle et la compétitivité de la production automobilière au Canada et aux États-Unis. Nous allons continuer de travailler de façon engagée et positive pour pouvoir résoudre cette situation.
Frédéric Arnould de Radio-Canada. Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous avez rencontré aussi Mme Pelosi et M. Schumer. Est-ce que vous avez senti qu'ils étaient plus réceptifs aux préoccupations canadiennes que M. Biden sur l'enjeu, encore une fois, des voitures électriques?
Évidemment, le Congrès est en train de débattre et possiblement de voter sur ces mesures actuellement. Alors, je ne vais pas présupposer ce qu'ils pensent ou ce qu'ils pourraient dire ou faire, mais je vais souligner qu'on a eu des conversations extrêmement positives et productives et ils sont très, très au courant des préoccupations du Canada et de l'impact potentiel que ça aura sur les emplois et la prospérité aux États-Unis aussi.
Et finalement, sur les enjeux canadiens, pendant ce sommet, vous aviez des attentes, des espoirs. Sur une échelle de 1 à 10, là, au niveau de votre satisfaction, vous en êtes où?
Ben, écoutez, je ne vais pas faire votre job pour vous de coter les rencontres. Ce que je peux dire, c'est qu'on a réussi à s'entendre sur les grands enjeux, que ce soit les chaînes d'approvisionnement ou avoir un rapport d'ici 120 jours, que ce soit au niveau de nos stratégies à l'international en Indo-Pacifique, par exemple, que ce soit au niveau du travail que nous allons faire ensemble sur la science science et la technologie, que ce soit sur les changements climatiques ou la COVID, on a eu une occasion de se rassembler entre 3 chefs progressistes en Amérique du Nord pour parler de nos préoccupations partagées et parler surtout de comment nous allons pouvoir mieux livrer pour nos citoyens. Ça a été une très, très bonne rencontre.
Prime Minister Steve Wickery from Bloomberg News. You would appear to be coming home somewhat empty-handed from this. The Conservatives put out a statement, admittedly before the summit ended, saying that U.S. relations are at a nadir despite the renewed Three Amigos summits. And I did note at the end of the communique when it came out that there will be another one held next year in Mexico. What can you tell Canadians that you're coming home with, and did you make any progress on Line 5? We spent a lot of time on EVs, but did you get any assurances on Line 5?
I think one of the things that probably really bugs Conservatives is to see that there are 3 strong progressive leaders in North America who've come together to talk about the things that really matter to citizens, whether it's growing good middle-class jobs through strengthening our trade and cooperation on big issues, whether it's putting an end to this pandemic, which, as the Conservatives know, passes through vaccinations, whether it's working to fight climate change, which is, again, something that Conservatives have dragged their heels on. These are things that we have come together to achieve, and we're going to continue to work in the best interests of all Canadians as a government and work in the interests of North Americans as 3 governments.
And on another subject related to slightly outside North America, I'm curious if the subject of Cuba came up. The Americans earlier on were talking about seeking a different approach from Canada and Mexico on Cuba. Canada and Mexico have warmer relations with Cuba than the U.S. After this weekend's protests were effectively completely stifled by the regime, was there any ask of the Americans to you or President Lopez Obrador on Cuba?
Canada has, for many, many decades now, pursued an independent policy, its own approach to Cuba, which does not align directly with the United States, but does not turn a blind eye to the real concerns we have around human rights violations and concerns for the Cuban people. We will continue to engage in a robust way and seek better opportunities for the Cuban people while keeping consistent with the Canadian approach that has always been effective.
Prime Minister, Nick Taylor-Easy from Politico. Obviously, British Columbians right now are going through a horrible time. Do you have any plans before the return of Parliament to visit British Columbia?
I will visit British Columbia when the time is right. Obviously, our priority right now needs to be on getting all the immediate help and rescue that people need, which is why we've been holding incident response groups. We've been deploying CAF members. Our ministers have been working very, very closely with their counterparts in the BC government, and I've had multiple conversations with my ministers, with the Premier, with indeed a number of mayors affected in the region. We will continue to stay on top of it and every step of the way do everything necessary to help the people of BC who are going through an extremely difficult time right now.
And on the border, at the summit today, was there any discussion about lessons learned from the pandemic and how to maybe align more effectively in the case of a similar crisis down there?
Absolutely. One of the concrete commitments that came out of this bilateral visit was a commitment, certainly between Canada and the U.S., to renew a vision for the border, to look at how we can draw lessons from the pandemic, lessons from the past years, to strengthen our ability to continue to smoothly move goods and services while keeping people safe, while respecting our values. These are the things that matter, and I look forward to seeing that dialogue unfold as led by our Minister of Public Safety and others.
Thank you. This is what concludes tonight's press. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse de ce soir. Merci tout le monde.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir tout le monde.